All right, should be going now. So in this video, we are going to work on solving trigonometric equations, and we'll use our arrow diagrams to help us understand the steps that we need to take along the way. To be supported by the notes that we took on the parent functions. If you don't have those notes, then you need to watch the parent function video for this as well. So to start with, what we're going to do is make our arrow diagram for this function. So it starts with an x. The x here gets multiplied by pi over 4. And then we add 2. That all goes into the sine parent function, which then gets multiplied by 16. And we subtract 5. And after doing all of that, we're supposed to end up at -7. I may end up doing some work on a calculator off screen here where you can't see it, but I'll make sure I tell you when I'm doing that. So the arrows coming back, we have a -7 here. We want to get back to the x. We're going to have to add a 5. We're going to divide by 16. We'll come back and fill that arrow in here in a second. This one will involve subtracting 2 and then multiplying by 4 over pi. Okay, from parent function notes, we know that this inverse of sine, if we want to find all of the solutions, has a lot going on. We are definitely going to do the inverse sine with the calculator, but we also need to add on 2 pi n to account for all the coterminal angles with that, and we need pi minus the inverse sine plus 2 pi n to account for the other location on the unit circle where we don't actually get those numbers. We'll draw a picture of that here in a little bit. I'm going to scoot some of this other stuff down for later. So as we're following through here, if we start with a -7 and we add 5 like it says, we're going to get a -2. And then we divide by 16, that takes us to a -1/8, and that's where we hit this inverse sine thing. I'm going to draw a little unit circle here. Remember, cosine comma sine, sines are y values. A y value of -1/8 is maybe around here somewhere. So I'd expect the calculator to tell me about this one, and then I've got to go looking for that one. So this will be, I'll have to split this into 2 problems now. So one of them will be the sine, the inverse sine of -1/8 plus 2 pi n. And the other one, I'll put over here on the far side of the screen, is going to be pi minus the inverse sine of -1/8 plus 2 pi n. And then the next step says to subtract 2 from both of those. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get a number out of this now. So making sure my calculator is in radian mode, I'm going to inverse sine the -1/8. And it gives me -0.1253 plus 2 pi n. I'll keep 4 decimal places. If I then add 2 onto that, or subtract 2 from that, I get a -2.1253 plus 2 pi n. And the final step is multiply that whole thing by 4 over pi. When I do that, multiply by 4 and divide by pi on that, and I get -2.7061 plus, the pi's will cancel there, and I'll get plus 8n. Okay, so this is one set of answers that should work. My other ones over here, then I need to do pi minus, so I'll take my pi minus the inverse sine, happening again on my calculator, of -1/8. And that gives me a 3.2669 plus 2 pi n, which I need to subtract 2 from. on my next step, which would give me a 1.2669 plus 2 pi n. And that all needs to get multiplied by 4 over pi. So minus 2 times 4 on the calculator again, and divide by pi, and I get 1.6131 plus 8n. Again, those are my other possibilities for x. So any of these should work as solutions for that problem. Could go back and check those. I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. I will point out that this has modified the period of this to show us the period of this function is now 8. That's what the adjustment is on the end there. Okay. So let's do another one. We'll do one with the cosine, since the inverse cosine is just a little bit different. But everything starts out the same way. I begin with my x. First thing it says to do is subtract pi, and then multiply by 3. All of that goes into the cosine. I am going to put multiply by -2 on there. I'm not describing transformation, so I don't need to split those into 2 different arrows. And that's supposed to get me to a 10 at the end. My arrows coming back then are going to be subtracting 9 and dividing by -2. There's my reverse of the cosine. I'll come back and fill that in a little bit, and divide by 3, and then add pi. Okay. And again, my inverse cosine from my parent function note says it's going to be the inverse cosine plus 2 pi n. And I also have to have the negative of the inverse cosine plus 2 pi n. So let's see where the numbers take us here now. I got 10 minus 9. That gives me a 1. 1 divided by -2 is a -1/2. And now I'm hitting that inverse cosine. So my little unit circle helper here. Cosines, remember, are x values, and an x of -1/2 is right here, and that's a real familiar sounding thing. In fact, I know that that corresponds to this angle over here of exactly 2 pi over 3 radians. I recognize the -1/2 as being the x-coordinate of that, or I can look at it on my unit circle. So my answers here, I don't need to go to my calculator this time. I can say from here my answers are going to split into a 2 pi over 3, okay? Or I'll get the other one over here, 2 pi over 3 plus 2 pi n. And my other version of it will be -2 pi over 3 plus 2 pi n. The next step says divide everything by 3. So if I divide everything here by 3, I'll get -2 pi over 9 plus 2/3 pi n. Over here, I'll get +2 pi over 9 plus 2/3 pi n. And then add pi. Okay. So if I add a pi on here, I'll add it as 9 pi over 9 to get the common denominator there, and that will leave me a 7 pi over 9 plus 2/3 pi n. Or the answer is over here. If I add my 9 pi over 9, I'm going to get 11 pi over 9 plus 2/3 pi n. Again, in order to do this, I need to know about my unit circle, and I need to have my parent function notes so that I remember what those inverses are that give me all of the answers to the problem. And that's a couple of examples of how to solve trigonometric equation.